Hello everyone, Jay Warden here, and it's time to recap and review what may very well be the worst episode of TNG, Code of Honor. Spoilers ahead of course, but honestly I wouldn't worry about it because it's a racist pile of shite. The Enterprise enters orbit of the planet Ligon 2, which has the only vaccine for some plague happening on some other planet we never see or give a fuck about, so the Federation wants to open negotiations with the locals on acquiring it. Picard invites the delegation to beam up, and once on board they roll out a shitty red carpet for their leader to make an unnecessarily dramatic and pompous entrance. Introductions are made and the Ligonian leader Lutan expresses surprise about women being in charge of things. Picard tells him to deal with it before requesting to see a sample of this magic cure for the planet we don't care about. Lutan's right-hand man Hagan goes to deliver it and tries to shove Yar out the way, but she isn't having any of that and promptly floors him. Yar confirms there's no funny shit inside the box and hands it to Picard, who thanks them before inviting them to stay for some entertainment. In the conference room, Lutan explains that they're suspicious of strangers but know the Federation needs the magic cure, and so long as they respect his authority, they will be happy to give them all they need. Lutan then says he wants to see the holodeck and insists Yar take him. On the holodeck, Yar shows off an Aikido program and has to fight with a holographic sparring partner, who makes swooshing noises as he fights, which I'm pretty sure is not standard Aikido practice. Hagan thinks it's all fake and tries himself and once again gets thrown on the floor. Lutan is impressed and says he'd definitely swipe right on Yar. Back in the cargo bay, Lutan thanks Picard for the evening and then says he wants to invite Yar to some Netflix and chill before grabbing her and beaming her back to the planet. Picard orders a red alert in the same way you'd warn someone on a train to mind the gap and then turns to look at the camera awkwardly. On the bridge, Picard tries to phone Lutan but is forced to leave a message and then asks Riker to fire a bunch of torpedoes to the planet and to detonate them 1,000 meters from the surface as a nice firework display. Riker complies but somehow fucks up because the torpedoes clearly detonate 1,000 kilometers above the surface, impressing nobody. Troy is surprisingly helpful and says Yar is probably okay and that Lutan has got some ideas in his head, whilst Data and Riker urge Picard to be patient and see what happens. A day later, Picard is trying to get some probing done to find out where Yar might be when Dr. Beverly comes to the bridge with Wesley hiding in the turbo lift. She has a private word with Picard and explains she can't replicate the sample Lutan gave them and then tries to guilt trip him by saying how bad this plague nobody cares about is and to try and get the cure right now. She then continues to annoy him by droning on about how smart Wesley is, so in order to get rid of her, he goes to the turbolift to invite Wesley to sit at the ops station. Everyone's like, WTF? But Picard insists, and Wesley, looking like all his Christmases have come true, sits down as instructed. We then have some more discussion on how idiotic the Ligonians are, and as Data remarks about an obscure language known as French, he explains that what Lutan did was prove to his people how ballsy he is given the Federation's superiority. Picard, though, is more upset about French being called obscure. Lutan finally calls them back and Picard immediately demands to see Yar, making Lutan upset. But Troy says that Picard has to suck up his pride and asks nicely for her to be returned, so he grits his teeth and complies, which makes Lutan happy, and he invites Picard down to the surface to come and get her. Riker though doesn't like this idea of Picard going because usually it's his job to have all the fun going on away missions, so Data and Troy convince him otherwise because Ligonians are fucking dumb as cultures go and this is the way it has to be. So Picard beams down with Troy and Lutan welcomes them, introduces his wife to Urena before saying he'll throw a banquet in his honour and show them a really good time. But Picard just wants to see Yar and politely shit talks about Ligonian culture before Yar is dragged in. At the banquet, Picard addresses the crowd and thanks everyone for being so nice to him and then asks for Yar to be returned. Lutan says he's impressed at just how good Picard is at sucking up to him before declaring that he'd rather keep Yar as his new wife, angering both Picard and his current wife. A great deal of terrible acting and melodrama then ensues with Urena challenging Yar in a fight to the death. Picard of course refuses to let this happen, so Lutan says he won't even get Yar or the magic cure unless he complies. In private, Troy wishes the Prime Directive wasn't a thing so they could just take Yar back and the magic cure by force and just be done with all this bullshit, and I find myself agreeing with her because this episode is really eroding my will to live. We check in quickly on the Enterprise where Dr. Beverly reminds the audience that we really should care about the random plague planet because a fuck ton of people are going to die real soon if they don't get this magic cure, which means Picard has to continue going along with this painful bullshit of an episode and let Yar fight. He wants to know though what the real motives are behind Lutan's bullshit, and after some smooth talking learns that it's basically all about land and power and that whoever loses, Lutan wins. Riker orders Data and LaForge to the transporter room, which is just as well because Data was trying to tell a joke, scaring LaForge whilst he's trying to shave. On the surface, Picard orders them to examine the Ligonian weaponry and fighting styles to give Yar the best chances of success before starting to make a speech about the Prime Directive. He gets bored halfway through though and just gives up and leaves, which also sums up how the audience must feel about this episode. Yar meets with Urena and tries to convince her that a fight's a really bad idea because she's just going to get her ass kicked and that she has no interest in Lutan. Urena responds by doing some more terrible melodramatic acting and oh fuck, just please make this episode stop already. Data and LaForge report back to Picard that the weapons have poison on them, so Yar needs to be really careful that she doesn't prick herself before hearing some grunting noises outside. It looks like Urena is training on some weird looking platforms with lethal looking green lasers surrounding it, so Picard sends Data back to the ship to brief Riker and Dr. Beverly on a cunning plan he has. Finally, the most boring and awkward trial by combat in history begins, and at one point Urena's gauntlet comes off and strikes some random guy in the crowd, instantly killing him. Nobody seems at all bothered by this and continue bashing their sticks together as if it's all good fun, even though by this point I just want to gouge out my eyeballs to make this horror stop. Yar finally lands a killing blow and both of them suddenly get beamed up to the ship. Lutan is obviously quite upset about this, but Picard is all cool and says Yar clearly got in the killing blow, and so he's fulfilled the demands of all this bullshit and got his officer back, and now wants the vaccine as well. Lutan agrees that at the end of the day it wasn't a total loss for him because he gets to keep all of Urena's stuff, and so finally lets Picard take all of the vaccine that they need. As Picard prepares to leave, he pulls a fast one and beams Lutan and Hagan up to the ship with him. He takes him to the conference room where Urena is somehow still alive. It seems Dr. Beverly successfully revived and healed her, and because she technically died, her marriage to Lutan is now null and void. Therefore, he no longer has access to her stuff. She then chooses, fuck this, I can't be bothered anymore. Finally, gloriously, we can say goodbye to all this utter bullshit, and Picard realises that Wesley is still sitting in ops, because I guess it's not really important that anyone actually mans that station. He thanks him and then tells him he'll make sure he gets another chance in the future, which delights Wesley. With the vaccine aboard, Picard orders the Enterprise off to the planet we never cared about but wish we really could have gone to instead of having to sit through the last 45 minutes. Fuck this episode. The story is shit, the characters are shit, the dialogue and music that go with it are shit, and with extreme bouts of melodrama, possibly the worst episode of TNG ever. It was just so hard to watch my way through this because there is absolutely nothing interesting about it and it's just horrifyingly bad. But I shall try my best to get some thoughts across beyond it being absolutely shite, because it's absolutely shite. Let's start with the Ligonians. They are just utterly dumb, and they invoke so many stupid stereotypical tropes. So, extreme patriarchal society? Check. Stupidly strict and dumb traditions? Check. Melodramatic dialogue and music? Check. Shitty costumes? Check. Fight to the death? Check. Dumb technical loophole to get out of said fight to the death? Check. Although I don't think that this was their intent, the episode ends up coming off as quite racist, portraying what seems to be a stereotypical African-inspired barbarian culture. But I found myself agreeing with Will Wheaton's assessment of this episode that if you had cast everyone as white, it would in no way change how shite this episode is, because the story, characters and dialogue are all awful no matter what colour your skin is. There is an episode of Stargate SG-1 called Emancipation, where this plot is replicated with Samantha Carter being abducted as a trophy for a powerful barbarian warlord, and then later having a fight to the death to escape. Except it's an Asian-inspired culture instead of an African-inspired one. This too was widely regarded as one of the worst episodes in the entire Stargate franchise, and coincidentally also one of its earliest Season 1 episodes. It should then perhaps come as no surprise that both Code of Honor and Emancipation were written by the same person, Catherine Powers. The thing is, there is merit to be had in a utopian, egalitarian society like the Federation coming up against a backward culture where racism, sexism and general inequality run rife, as a way to examine our own society and history. This is what science fiction in general can absolutely excel at, and there are in fact several good episodes of Star Trek throughout the franchise which deal with such issues. For example, the TOS episode Let This Be Your Last Battlefield, or Deep Space Nine's Far Beyond the Stars. However, here in Code of Honor, the execution of these ideas is atrocious, and what we end up with is racist, sexist and utter drivel. As for how the crew deal with this, whilst not nearly being quite as stupid as in the Naked Now episode, they certainly don't do themselves any favours. When Yar is first abducted, Picard's reaction is one of almost indifference, ordering a red alert and then just turning casually towards the camera and standing still, showing a lack of urgency despite one of his officers being kidnapped right in front of him. But then it flips the other way, and in a highly aggressive action orders a barrage of torpedoes over the planet's surface to try and scare this primitive culture into giving Yar back to them. Not very Starfleet of Picard if you ask me, and certainly not very Picard, well, Picard in later seasons anyway. Okay, yes, the ticking clock element in this episode is the random plague that's affecting the random planet, none of which I care about, and that the Ligonians have the only vaccine that can stop it, so you don't want to piss them off because millions will die, yada yada. But why couldn't they just lock onto Yar's comm badge and beam her straight back to the ship before this even became an issue? It's never taken from her, and it's established in countless Trek episodes that comm badges are basically how you track your officers regardless of whether they're on a ship or a planet's surface. I mean, LaForge literally demonstrated this in the previous episode by removing his comm badge so he couldn't be tracked. They don't even try to locate her and instead just go straight to stern warnings and a torpedo barrage. If they had beamed her straight back up, wouldn't it make Lutan look weak and stupid and give way for someone else to challenge him? Or would he have still achieved the bold feat of taking Yar from under their noses, looking powerful in the eyes of his people and satisfying their codes of honour? Anyway, once it's established why Lutan took Yar and what he hopes to achieve by this, there's some minor debate about the Prime Directive and how easy it would be for them to simply take Yar and the vaccine with their superior technology and firepower. Picard even starts giving a speech, but then, almost as if he's throwing shade at the audience, stops halfway through and says no one needs to hear him rambling about something everyone knows and then walks off. It's like they couldn't even be bothered to try and make a good philosophical argument about the benefits and drawbacks to the Prime Directive, and the comparing of Ligonian culture to how humans used to behave, but rather they just wanted to tell the audience why they couldn't beam Yar back and get it out of the way so they could move on. The actual fight to the death is awful, with Yar and Lutan's wife Urena trying to awkwardly hit each other on some weird obstructive looking platform with lethal laser barriers. Speaking of Urena, I think she pissed me off the most with the atrocious line delivery and awful dialogue, particularly when Yar is trying to convince her not to fight, asking how can Yar not love Lutan as if being abducted by some self-important and power-hungry twat makes you instantly fall in love with him. I mean, just... this episode makes me angry. So was there anything I liked at all? There was actually a nice little scene between LaForge and Data. Here, Data is trying to tell a joke but obviously ends up failing because he doesn't understand humour, and then his tongue slips and he ends up saying something unintentionally silly which makes LaForge laugh. Data is obviously confused by this, and honestly I was a little too, because it shouldn't really be possible for Data to make that kind of language error. But otherwise it's a nice moment, and it shows the beginning of the friendship between these two characters that will often be used for Data trying to understand various aspects of humanity. The only other thing of note to mention, and it's almost forgotten amongst all the other shite you have to wade through, is the show begins developing the future of Wesley's character by having him sit on the bridge and observe what's going on. I was almost amused that the crew had forgotten he was even there until Picard returned at the end of the episode. It's a nice little bit of character development we get, and it does it without Wesley being annoying. I think overall it's fair to say that if there are any episodes of Trek you can skip, then this would absolutely be top of your list. Seriously, just don't put yourself through the pain of this episode unless you enjoy punishing yourself, and be glad that I went through it for you so you didn't have to. Thankfully, the next episode is a bit more entertaining and introduces the Ferengi to the franchise, though not the Ferengi we come to know and love in DS9. I hope you continue to enjoy my reviews, and if so, please do like, subscribe and share. Until next time, this is Jay Warden, signing off.